All right, good afternoon. Wow, those are our bright lights. Everyone have a good lunch? Nice and relaxed. All right, so I thought I'd do something a little bit different today and try to give you a little bit of a peek into how we think at YouTube. When new employees join YouTube, we run a training. It's called YouTuber Training, very nicely named. And at that training, I give a talk about purpose. And what I decided was to give the same talk to you today. To just give you a little glimpse into how we think about things. Now, the reason I talk about purpose when new employees join YouTube is that, as opposed to talking about strategy or products or how things work, I choose to talk about purpose, about why we do what we do. And the reason is because our employees are making a huge investment into YouTube. They're taking their most precious asset, their time, and they're investing it into our mission. And I think it's very important that they see that what we're working on is not just about building a good business or a popular service, but about really doing something meaningful. And I thought it's appropriate to do the same thing here, since most of you are also taking some of your most precious resources and devoting it to this mission, your time, your money, your careers in some cases. And so I thought I'd talk about purpose. Now, when I give this talk, it's actually a very personal talk. And I talk in particular about 5 things that give me purpose. I've now worked on YouTube for 5 years, which is a lifetime in the online video industry. And over those 5 years, I've collected a set of stories and perspectives that shape how I think about what we're working on. And so I've grouped these together into 5 themes, and I wanted to share the same with you. And I really have 2 goals from this session. One is help you understand a little bit how we think, or specifically how I think, just so we can be better partners for each other. And the second is I'm hopeful that as you think about your investments that you're making on YouTube, it gives you some of these stories spark some of your own stories, gives you some of your own perspective that you can share further with each other, with your teams, and help frame what we're working on. All right, so that's all the preamble. Let me now jump in and talk about 5 things that give me purpose. And the first one I'm going to talk about is about gatekeepers. And I'm going to start with the story about this fellow. Anybody know who this is? So his name is Sal Khan. He runs a popular YouTube channel called Khan Academy. And I thought it was appropriate to start with this story because if you were to stop me on a corner and ask me why I work on YouTube, there's a better than average chance I'd end up talking about this fellow. So let me tell you a little bit about Sal's story and my role in it. So Sal and I went to college together. We both went to MIT. And as we left college, we went 2 different directions. He went the finance route, I went the technology route, and he ended up working at a hedge fund. We stayed pretty close together. We actually both married our college sweethearts. Both of our wives are physicians. We live a couple miles from each other. And so we would stay in touch, have dinners, and so on. And then in 2008, I joined YouTube. And he and his wife were over for dinner. And I told him I've joined YouTube, very excited about it. And he told me that, oh, I'm on YouTube too. And for those of you that have never met Sal, he's an incredibly humble guy. So he told me his story, but it was very understated. And he said, oh, he's got this cousin, lives down in Louisiana, who is having trouble with her math homework. And she asked for help from her accomplished older cousin. And he decided to tutor her. And the easiest way they could think of to collaborate at the time was she would send him questions, and he would videotape himself answering them and send back the videos. And the easiest way to send back videos at the time was to put them on YouTube. And it turned out that there was lots and lots of other people watching it, and that's how his channel took off. So he's telling me all of this over dinner, said, that's very interesting, thank you for joining the millions of creators on YouTube, but I didn't think that much of it. I go to work the next day, and I looked up his statistics. And in 2008, which is still pretty early in the YouTube journey, a couple educational institutions had decided to put all of their content on YouTube, Stanford and MIT, my own college. And they were, every lecture that I attended was now available on YouTube. So I look it up, and I write Sal an email. I said, I don't think you realize this, but you're getting more viewership than MIT and Stanford combined. And he's doing this all in his free time. And I said, you have to join the YouTube Partner Program. At the time, you had to be invited to join the YouTube Partner Program. But it allowed him to join and make money and so on. So you fast forward a few months, early 2009, he and his wife are over for dinner again, and his wife and my wife were actually both pregnant at the same time, which is kind of important to the story. And so he says, thank you, Shishir, for getting me in the partner program. The checks have been coming in. It's very helpful. And he said, I've been working on this for a while and looking at my revenue chart. And he's a mathematician, so he extrapolates. He says, my revenue chart's going like this, and I can see out here pretty soon it's going to pay our rent. And if I look just a little bit further out, it's going to pay more than my hedge fund salary. And I much prefer doing this to what I'm doing at the hedge fund, and so I'm thinking about quitting and doing this full time. And at this moment, his wife looks at me and gives me this big stare of a very intense stare, asking me to answer this question properly. And Sal asked me, "Is this going to keep going? Is this for real?" And I said, "Well, I bet my career on it, and I think it's going to keep going." And so I said yes. And he did end up quitting and doing this full time, and now his channel reaches about 8 million people a month, which, to put in perspective, PBS reaches something like 1.5 million people a month. So I think he's the single biggest educator on the planet right now, attracted tens of millions of dollars of investment as well, and is doing quite well. Now, the reason I tell this story for this group and how it ties back to purpose, of course, it's nice to have a friend succeed like that. But I want you to imagine it a little bit differently. Imagine this fellow, Sal, had come in to a network and pitched a show and said, I'd like to do a show about education, math in particular. And they would ask, well, are you an educator? He said, no, I've never taught anybody. They'd say, well, are you in media? Are you an actor? Any training? He says, no, I don't do anything like that. And they say, okay, tell me about the concept for your show. He says, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the algebra book, and I'm going to start with the first question in the book, and I'm going to solve it, and I'm going to videotape myself doing it, and I'm going to go till the end of the book. And then I'm going to start at the next book and do it again, and that's going to be the show. And there's no music, and he doesn't even show his face. There's no intro, but that's it. That's my show. And I think he would have gotten laughed out of the room. And the only reason he was successful is because he didn't have to ask anybody, and he got started. And I think that's quite interesting. Let me tell you one more. This fellow's name is Bauer. So he's a DJ who was behind a popular song called Harlem Shake, which hopefully everybody has seen and danced to at some point. And the reason this one is interesting, I put it on the Billboard background. So Billboard has been measuring music artists for 57 years now. And in the history of Billboard, there's never been an artist to debut at #1 who is unsigned and unknown. And he was the first one to do it. Again, nobody stood in his way, nobody to ask permission. And I had just one more example that I thought was fairly fun. So this guy's name is Havard Rugland, and he's a Norwegian football player. And there's a little clip here, so I'll play this. He is a football player in Norway, and his club team didn't have enough funding and had to shut down. So he's a little bit bored. He got on YouTube and started learning that there's some people in America that kick a ball that's a slightly weird shape and call it football as well. And he said, well, I bet I can do that. And so he got on, and he started practicing and doing some amazing things. And then he put this video on YouTube. It's called Kickalicious, and it got millions of views. And so he puts this video on YouTube, gets millions of views. And the following week, he gets a call from the New York Jets, a popular NFL team, and asking him if he'd like to try out for the team. And so he's actually out now and trying to make his way through the NFL. So you take these three stories, and I think there's something very interesting here. Now imagine you had a friend came to you and said, I'd like to be a world-class educator, I'd like to be a great musician, I'd like to be an American football player. What would you tell them to do? If it was 5 years ago, I think what you tell them is, well, if you want to be an educator, you should probably go to school, go to college, learn how to do it. For the musician, you'd probably say, make a demo tape, move to some popular city, move to Los Angeles, play at some bars, hope somebody hears you. And if you were the football player, you'd probably tell them it's too late, you can't go change into that industry. But it's not that crazy if you think about the world as it is today. It's not that crazy to take any of those three people and tell them, maybe you should start by starting a YouTube channel. And I think that's sort of an interesting way to think about when we think about no gatekeepers. We generally think about how people can build new media brands. But all three of these examples of people breaking into entirely different industries, where the role of media is just helping them succeed and break into a place that they couldn't have before. So that's topic number one. Number two, I want to talk a little bit about education. So we had this review, this is probably a couple years ago now, and is run by our education team, actually a guy named Baljit who's here today. He started the meeting with this sentence. He said, our goal is parents should tell their kids to read fewer books and watch more YouTube. And that's the reaction he got. Everybody in the room laughed, so that's kind of crazy. And over the course of the year, I started thinking more and more about it. And there was one story that stuck out for me was one of my own kids. So these are my daughters. That's Annika, that's Ria. Yes, I know, they're super cute. And so we were looking for a school for Annika, the older one. And we were out looking at all the different schools. We'd go visit. And we visited a school that eventually became her kindergarten. And they do this fascinating thing there where they teach all the kids in the school Mandarin, right from the start. And so we show up in December, watch the kindergarten class, and there's all these little 5-year-olds, and they're teaching the class, the Mandarin class, and the entire time we were there, not a word of English was spoken. These kids are 5 months into school, and they're able to play games, do lessons, so on, all in Mandarin. And now the interesting part is the way that they're achieving it is something they call reverse learning. So in the classroom, they actually don't teach a lot of lessons. What they do is they send the kids home, and they give us a list of videos for the kids to watch. They sit at home, they learn all the lessons, learn all the characters, learn all their words. In fact, I get to learn a little bit along with them. And then they go back to class and they practice there. And so I was thinking about it. You know, when Annika comes home, I actually really like that she spends her time watching videos. Maybe this isn't so crazy. And it made us think a lot more about this sentence, parents tell their kids to read fewer books and watch more YouTube. You know, maybe it's not that crazy. And I started making a list of what would it take for us to get there. And there's kind of two lists. One is, what would it take to get to parity? What would it take for us to feel like video and YouTube and so on could give people an experience sort of on par with what they get from their education system, from their classroom? And then what would it take to go way ahead? So the first list is simple. We need to make YouTube feel a lot more safe for them and make sure that there's ways to ensure your kids stay in places where you want them to stay, all things we're working on. You'd like it to be the case that it feels interactive, that video today still feels more one way than it should, but a lot of the things we're already working on, whether that's with the annotations, the comments, or the Hangouts, or so on, are changing a lot of that. And you'd like people to feel a sense of community, that when you sit in a classroom, you not only learn from the teacher, you learn from the peer sitting next to you, but again, on YouTube, there's a lot of things we're doing that are helping the community around you be part of that conversation. So those things are all solvable, and things that I think we could get to a point where you could actually create a classroom experience that's as good as being in the classroom. But I also think the more exciting part is how much better it can be. And you think about some of the simplest ways, the easiest one to think of is you can get much better teachers. And instead of, I happen to live in California where there are actually a lot of Mandarin speakers, but if I happen to live somewhere else where there weren't, I could reach not only a better teacher, but perhaps the best global teacher for this topic. If you think about some other ways it could be better, I think that we think about learning in context. You ask anybody what's the best way to learn Mandarin, the best way to learn Chinese, they say, well, the best way to learn is move to China. And spend a year there, not because you get better teachers, but because you get the environment around you, you get to watch the same TV shows, you get to go to the same grocery market, you get to learn how to negotiate for a taxi cab, and so on. And interestingly, YouTube actually has a lot of that content. So it's not that crazy to say you can recreate the experience of being a young person in China and have similar experiences. You can think about historical learning. If you think about physics, for example, today you learn from a physics teacher who's repeating something that some great physicist came up with years ago. Imagine if you could hear the lectures directly from Einstein or for Feynman. Some of those actually exist today. And if you think to the future, I think most of the lessons will be taught by the people who actually came up with the concept, not by someone who's seen it passed on through 4 or 5 stages. You can learn at your own pace. You can see people learn very differently. They can learn in different directions. They can choose to learn one topic and then branch somewhere else. They can speed up and slow down. One of the things we're launching with some of the new player enhancements is the ability to watch in double speed, which actually is a fantastic way to watch some of this content. And you put all that together and made me think a little bit about this sentence. And I happened to be talking to my grandfather, and my grandfather grew up in India. And one of the things he was telling me was, when he was growing up, books weren't such a good thing. And a lot of books were seen as trashy, and he wasn't actually that encouraged to read books. So from his perspective, this idea was not that crazy at all. And so when I think about why I do what I do, I think the idea of working on a platform that could be as important as books are, I think is quite inspirational. So that's number 2. So number 3, I had an interview with someone applying for a job at YouTube. And one of the questions I often ask people is, why YouTube? Why do you want to work here? And he gave me this answer. He said, how could I not want to work on YouTube? YouTube is the most important advance in communication since the telephone. And I thought this was a little bit over the top. I actually didn't give him a job. Not just because of this. But over the years, I've thought about the sentence, and I've sort of framed it a little bit differently. The obvious interpretation of the sentence is the telephone is audio, and YouTube is video, and video is better than audio, so this must be true. But I think that's a very simplistic way to look at it, and I wanted to give you a couple examples of why that's not enough. So this is a fellow named Jason Carpenter, and he's a cancer survivor. And as he was going through his treatment, he started a YouTube channel and talked to the world about what was happening. And he wrote us a letter, and it's a long letter, but I wanted to read a section of the letter to you and give you a sense of what he went through. So this is what he said. He said, I'd like you to know why I created my YouTube channel. Number 1, half of my family lives in Boston, with the other half in California. I live in New York City and had no plans of moving back home to have my family take care of me. YouTube was the best way for my friends and family to know that I was okay and to see how I was doing. Interestingly, it also allowed my doctors in New York to keep tabs on me when I was away from the hospital and see how I was doing on the many drugs and treatments they gave me. Number 2, to show that cancer is not always pretty, that it's nothing like what they show in the movies, and that it's certainly not the end of the line. I wanted people who suffered from the disease to feel like they were not alone while helping their friends and families try to understand what their loved ones might be going through. I wanted to show the naked, unabashed truth about cancer. I honestly have never publicized my page or even tried to spread the word. I figured that those who needed it would find it, but much to my surprise, I've received hundreds, literally, of letters from people on every continent. The videos even caught the eye of the American Cancer Society, who made me an unpaid spokesperson for fundraisers. I've gotten lots of letters from family members of those with myeloma. One woman closes her eyes and listens to my videos, pretending it's her brother talking to her about his struggles because he refuses to talk about it. In other words, somehow, some way, these videos have made a difference to people. The videos also caught the eye of a girl I dated over 15 years ago, who saw them and contacted me after years of not speaking to me. Well, since then, she's moved to New York City from Florida to be with me, and we are planning on getting married. The letter continues on, but I think you likely get the point. Let me tell one more story before I connect it back to that sentence. So this fellow's name is Vincent Dureau. He's an engineering director at Google. He works on Google TV, and he's a quadriplegic. And he runs a channel on YouTube called Danjanet. And the channel is all videos of how to do things in a wheelchair, specifically if you're a quadriplegic, how to do things in a wheelchair. And the way he tells the story is that every quadriplegic has a similar pattern, that at some point they broke their neck, they go spend long time in a hospital, often months, sometimes years, just trying to get all their systems back in order, and then they kick you out of the hospital back to your house. And he said it's an incredibly lonely experience because nobody around you can understand what you're going through, and it's impossible to get everyday things done. And so his channel is all videos of how to do very simple things, how to get in and out of the wheelchair, how to take a shower, how to put your pants on, how to get in and out of the car. He has an ingenious trick for how to get the trunk of your car to close by hanging a little string on it because he can't reach up that high. So he puts this channel out. He's got a couple thousand loyal viewers, other quadriplegics that love his lessons. They reply, they comment, they run their own videos. And by the way, there's a whole community of people on YouTube that is the paraplegics that do a totally different set of such videos, because you can do a totally different set of things as a paraplegic. And the reason I mentioned these two stories is come back to the sentence. Say, why could this sentence be true? And like I said, the simplistic version is, well, video is better than audio, so it must be true for that reason. But I think it's actually different. I think the telephone was a great way for people to connect with people they knew across the world and stay connected with their friends and family. But I think what we saw from both of these stories was not about the fact they were using video, but it was who they were connecting with. That made it an interesting platform. It was this idea that you could find other people going through similar struggles as a cancer survivor, as a quadriplegic. And as I thought about it more and more, the sentence started to make a lot more sense to me. I think that's a very important way to think about what we're building here. So next, I wanted to talk about building a better town square. So anyone know who this person is? So Nida Sultan was a young musician. In June of 2009, she was 26 years old in Iran, in Tehran. And there had just been an election. Ahmadinejad had just been elected, and there were a lot of people that thought that the election was rigged. And so there were thousands of people out in the streets in peaceful protest, and she was among them. The Iranian government had a plainclothes militia, dressed like everyone else, called the Basij, that were asked to go out and put down the demonstration. Something got a little bit out of hand, and she was shot in the street. Somebody happened to be standing around with a cell phone camera and captured the video and uploaded it to YouTube. And I won't play it here because I think it's a little bit too graphic, but video literally of her dying in the street. This video spread around the world and ended up creating a movement. Nida means voice in Farsi, and created a movement around the world for Nida Speaks. And a lot of people attribute this particular event and this video to starting what eventually became the Arab Spring, which I think has enormous effect all over that region. Now, the interesting part of this story is that at this time, the Iranian government had kicked all the journalists out of the country. So there was no press, there were no reports coming out. And if there hadn't been a platform like YouTube, this story may never have been told. And I think that idea that we're living in a world that I think someone earlier called it a global village, with a much smaller world where we can all participate and see the same town square, I think is a very exciting world and allows us to be more optimistic about the future for society as a whole. Number 5. So if you think for a moment about what happened with Nida and the Arab Spring, and through that process, there was a lot of tools used. There was, YouTube was used a lot, but also tools like Facebook and Twitter and so on. And if you look at all those tools, they all share one important characteristic, that they're all ad-supported services. And that means that the reason why people have this ability to broadcast to the world for free is because a set of advertisers came along and said they were willing to help with that cost. And so my 5th reason for purpose is about advertisers and enabling new types of businesses. So let's do a little exercise. Imagine for a moment that we're selling vacuum cleaners, and we've decided to sell vacuum cleaners door to door. And we're going to run a little experiment. We're going to take our sales force, our door-to-door sales force, and we're going to incent them different ways. So we're going to take a third of them over here, and we're going to say, you're going to you go out, sell vacuums, knock on doors, and we're going to pay you a penny for every door that you knock on. And smart salesperson raises his hand and says, wait a second, a penny for every door? What if nobody's home? I said, doesn't matter. He says, well, what if there's like all the gates are up and the house is condemned and there's clearly nobody's ever lived there? So it doesn't matter. Go ahead. You can knock on all those doors. You get a penny per house that door that you knock on. I come to this group and say, you're going to get $1 for every door that you knock on, but you're only allowed to knock on doors if the person has hung a sign outside their window that says they'd like to buy a vacuum cleaner. And smart salesperson raises his hand and says, wait a second, nobody hangs that sign outside their window. I said, I know, but you go find them, you can knock on those doors, you can get $1 for every one of those people, and they go off and running. And this third group, I say, you'll also get $1 for every door that you knock on, and you can knock on as many doors as you like, but I'm only going to pay you if you can get the person to open the door and let you give your pitch, let you spill the stuff on their carpet and do the vacuum routine and so on, and if they don't throw you out, then I'm going to pay you. All right, and for people that did get the analogy, I think of this as the CPM world, the cost per thousand impressions world. This is kind of the CPC world, the cost per click world, and this is the cost per view world. And I made it sound a little bit. I made the middle one in particular sound a little bit crazy, but it's important to remember that actually has created billions of dollars worth of value in the industry. This is, the whole world for a long time bought on a cost per thousand basis, and now we have billions of dollars being transacted in this way of people literally getting paid to knock on doors of people who have said they're interested in your product already. Not only that, but it created an entire new class of businesses. And if you talk to the early days of, talk to the team that worked on the early days of AdWords, they'll tell you stories of the shoe salesman in Texas that never could have reached his audience and been able to sell shoes, that all of a sudden could do it because he could go find these people looking for shoes all over the world. So it's, it's not that crazy. And one of the things that inspires me is that what we're doing in changing an advertising model again with cost per view advertising, what we're doing with TrueView, is not only going to hopefully create a lot of revenue for us and for our partners, but it's going to create entirely new types of businesses. Let me give you one example. So this is a company called Orabrush, and the story is that it was this product, that's the product there, is a tongue scraper. He likes to refer to it as a toothbrush for your tongue. And it was invented by an inventor named Dr. Bob, who invents lots and lots of products. And he was giving a talk to a group of business school students, and he said, this is a product that you cannot market. Right? This product is, he said, I've tried everything. I tried direct response marketing. I've tried buying TV spots. I've tried the radio. I've tried doing things out of home. None of it works. You can't market this product. Just give up. And one of the guys in the room, actually this guy, raised his hand and said, I bet I can market it. And so he created a video, put it on YouTube, called Why Do People Have Bad Breath? And the video took off, was watched millions of times, and they sold millions of these toothbrushes for your tongue all over the world before they ever had a presence in any retail outlet. And for people that are familiar with the retail business, the idea of launching a toothbrush online is absolute insanity. But it worked. And so if you think about what the characteristics of this business, why does this work? I think you could divide businesses in a few different sets. I think when we're talking about this sort of middle group of salespeople, these are going after businesses that where people are out looking for them, and there are actually a surprisingly large number of them. AdWords has over 2 million advertisers now, and so people do go look for things and hang signs outside their windows saying that they're interested in vacuum cleaners, and that's an amazing innovation. But there's a few million of them, and if you look at the over 100 million businesses in the world, I think a broader set of businesses have another characteristic. I call them the elevator pitch business. Elevator pitch business meaning that if you were to get the CEO and have him trapped in an elevator for 30 seconds, that he could convince you to be interested in his product. And I think that some people would say every business should have that characteristic, but it's certainly a lot more businesses have that characteristic than businesses for which people have hung signs outside their window. Just to give an easy personal example, my wife is a physician, and physicians actually have a very hard time marketing themselves, and she does buy AdWords, but it's pretty rare that people think about doctors that way. But we've never been to a dinner party with strangers where she doesn't walk out with a new patient. And so when I think about what we're doing with cost per view advertising with TrueView, I think we're giving an opportunity for any business that can construct a pitch that they can deliver quickly and succinctly to have a shot at reaching an audience that may not yet be interested in their products. And I think that's going to create a whole new type of business, and I think that's very inspiring as well. So these are my 5 stories. When I think about why I work on YouTube, I love the idea that what we're doing in removing gatekeepers is not only going to change media, but it's going to change many industries as well. I think it's, as a parent, I think it's very inspiring to think about the idea that we could be working on the platform that could replace something as fundamental as books. The idea that just like the telephone allowed you to communicate with people in new ways, that we allow people to change who they communicate with in new ways, that we're bringing the world together into a much better town square, hopefully a more fair, more open, more transparent town square, and that we might be creating an entirely new class of businesses that we may not have seen before. And so those are my 5 sections of purpose. Hopefully some of that gives you some insight first into how we think about things and why we do what we do, and hopefully at least some of those stories are things that you can take back as well to your colleagues and your teammates as well. Thank you very much for coming and listening, and that's it.